Good afternoon, and welcome to Happiness, Harmony, and Compassion with Skywalker Payne, my daily Facebook Live. This week, the theme is spirituality, and we're going to begin today, as we did yesterday, with a few moments of silence in the hope that someone will drop through and just to calm me down because I was out running around at the grocery store. And here we begin. Well, today's title and theme is A Way of Life. And that was what my teacher, my Buddhist teacher, His Holiness Shepwan Daiwa Rinpoche, said when I took refuge with him as a Buddhist over 20 years ago. But it took me a long time to find this way of life and to find what I call my spiritual home. It begins when I was just a baby and my mother baptized me as a Catholic in Las Vegas, Nevada. She wasn't a Catholic yet, but she knew that if I was a Catholic, I could go to Catholic schools, which were good schools compared to the segregated schools at the time that were only available when I was born. I was a very serious Catholic little girl. I wanted to be a saint. I tried to be good. I didn't even think about being bad, the way my sisters told me they did when they were little. But as I grew up and entered high school, now before I entered high school, my best girlfriend in 7th grade was a very religious and serious young lady. Her name was Janice Fluhart, and she died of multiple sclerosis. She was going to become a nun. She knew that in her heart. And in 8th grade, I decided that I would follow in her footsteps and become a nun. And the school we went to, the Catholic school, was run by Resurrection Sisters, and they had a program in which high school girls could live in the convent and get used to convent life without taking their vows after they were seniors. So I went to Chicago, lived in the convent, Norwood Park, a Polish convent. And by my sophomore year, I knew that this really wasn't what I wanted to do. I was too rebellious, too free-spirited, and I wanted to be a doctor. And the nuns could only be nurses. Fortunately, I didn't have to confess that I had lost my vocation because my family, my father had gotten transferred to Tripoli, and we thought we were going to Africa. But that didn't happen because of a man named Gaddafi. So I finished high school, but in my senior year of high school, my world history teacher talked about how the Catholic Church was directly responsible for colonialism, for the oppression and enslavement of African people and Indian people and people around the world. That, along with me having boyfriends and doing things I got tired of going to confession for, led me, by the time I was in college, to divorce myself from the Catholic Church. But I still was seeking something. I knew there was something more in life than just the everyday life. I read European philosophers. They left me dry. And so I was a limbo until I discovered Islam. My first introduction to Islam was through the Black Muslims, and that was not a very happy introduction because I realized there was more of hate than spirituality in that organization. But later, a man who ran a clothing store and a magazine called Black Stage Magazine in Washington, D.C., gave me a Quran, and I read that book, just the verses, all the way through, and the poetry, and the words of the creation of the heavens and earth, and being good and kind touched me. And I took Shahada, which is claiming faith and belief in the one God, Allah, and the teachings of Muhammad. But Islam is a religion that's very difficult to practice without community. And although I was in a community for a short time, as a single woman, it was the most terrible experience of my life because all the women were afraid I wanted their husbands, and I didn't. So once again, I was floating, and I floated for quite a long time. I eventually ended up learning to meditate through Siddha Yoga when I lived in Los Angeles. I was initiated by Swami Muktananda, who pressed his finger in my third eye. I didn't have visions, but I knew I was on a spiritual quest. And it took me to further exploration of Hinduism with the Self-Realization Fellowship and finding Kriya Yoga, Babaji's Kriya Yoga, and that led me directly to Buddhism. And I came into Buddhism through Tibetan Buddhism, reading the biography of Padmasambhava, written by a woman, his student, Yeshe Sogyo. She so impressed me because this woman who came from a rich family and was supposed to marry a royalty, but wanted to pursue a spiritual life. She was cast out. She was raped by men. And instead of being distraught and going through psychological changes, she forgave them and converted them on the spot. So years later, when I'm in Denver, I saw a teaching and empowerment about Padmasambhava, and that was when I met my teacher. And he spoke perfect English. He was the same age as I. And all of those questions that I hadn't been able to have answered about Buddhism and spirituality became clear. And I went from one teaching to the next teaching because he kept offering free teachings. And before I knew it, I was taking refuge in the Dharma, in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is the enlightened one. The Dharma are the teachings, and the Sangha are all those who practice the teachings. And what is good about Buddhism is, one, it's not something you are instructed to take on faith. Rather, you're instructed to test it and see if what the teachers say is true. And I found that it is true. I found that doing the practices daily, every day, changes the mind and the heart. I learned to recognize my anger, to control it, to control what I'd say, to control what I felt. I began to feel my heart opening. And I found I could do the practice every single day. And I have for over 20 years. And this is my spiritual grounding. This is my spiritual home. And it's with me, even though I don't have the Sangha that led me into Buddhism. In fact, I'm very far from any grounded Sangha, but I have teachers. And now with the internet, there's so many teachings online and so many books. And I found a teacher here who visits Homer, Tulku Rinpoche, and a Sangha of sorts. So that is my spiritual journey. That is how I came to take refuge with a teacher who told me I was not entering a religion, but a way of life. And that's the way it is with any true spiritual practice. It is a way of life that opens one's heart and leads one to happiness and practicing compassion for others. And anyone who says that their religion does not open their heart or encourage practicing compassion, they're in a religion, but not on a spiritual path. That's my story. That's what my spiritual path is. So tell me, what is your spiritual path? What has been your experience of seeking the spiritual? How have you found your way to open your heart and practice compassion for other people? Thank you for listening. Yvette Lee is here. Thank you, Yvette. You are a great support. And I'd love for you to share some comments about what you feel, what your spiritual experience has been. And for all of you out there who eventually hear or watch this video, share in the comments your spiritual experiences. Until tomorrow, have a wonderful day or wonderful evening wherever you are in the world.